Time for the early evening BBC News, now on BBC One Wales, with Sophie Rayworth and Rebecca John.
Good evening. World leaders have paid tribute to the former Pope Benedict XVI, who has died at the age of 95. He led the Roman Catholic Church for 8 years until 2013, when he became the first pope in 6 centuries to resign from the papacy. King Charles today praised his efforts to promote peace, and Pope Francis said his predecessor was a kind man who was a gift to the Church. Our religion editor, Alim Makboul, looks back at his life.
Cerebral by character, Benedict was a prolific author and more at home with scholarship than pastoral work. He led the world's Catholics for 8 years and then abruptly resigned, the first pope to do so in 600 years. The passing of the man considered by hundreds of millions around the world to represent a direct link to Jesus was announced by his successor.
We are moved as we recall him as such a noble person, so kind, and we feel such gratitude in our hearts. Gratitude to God for having given him to the Church and to the world.
Joseph Ratzinger was born in southern Germany. He was just 6 when the Nazis swept into power. His parents were hostile to the regime, and though their son entered junior seminary in 1939, he was forced to join the Hitler Youth just 2 years later. He and his brother George were ordained on the same day in 1951. George became a parish priest. Joseph chose a quite different kind of ministry. First a doctorate, appointments at prestigious universities, and then the Vatican. As a cardinal, he upheld traditional Catholic teaching on abortion, contraception and homosexuality. He even spoke against rock music and the Harry Potter books. When John Paul II died in April 2005, he was one of the Church's longest-serving cardinals and presided over the funeral. After just 4 ballots, white smoke from the Sistine Chapel announced Cardinal Ratzinger's election. Habemus Papam, the oldest pope for 275 years. As Pope Benedict XVI, he sought to re-evangelize the West. It was an attempt to roll back the advance of secularism in Europe and North America. But in it lay an acknowledgement of the Church's declining influence in its traditional heartlands. Back in Rome, the Church was beginning to confront the scandal of sexual abuse by priests around the world. He was forced to deny that he'd played any role in covering up abuse, but the cases continued to mount. He later acknowledged he'd made mistakes in handling the matter. In February 2013, he shocked the world, announcing he would resign at the end of the month, citing age and failing health. The election of his successor, Pope Francis, represented a break with much of what Benedict had stood for.
He was probably one of the outstanding theologians of the 20th century. So he was a philosopher, a thinker, and a European. Pope Francis is quite different. He's from Latin America. He brings a whole different resource to the life of the Church, one which pays more attention to what you might call popular movement.
Pope Benedict upheld the creeds of the Church and taught them with conviction. He died as he lived, thinking and writing about how to defend and advance those creeds in an increasingly secular world.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Bethany Bell, who is at the Vatican. And Bethany, the funeral will take place next Thursday, and it will be another moment of history.
Yes, Pope Francis will preside over that funeral, and it is, according to Pope Benedict's biographer, the first time that a sitting pope will preside over the funeral of his predecessor. Pope Benedict's biographer said that Benedict will be making history not only in his resignation but also in his death. Tributes to the former Pope have been pouring in from around the world. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said Benedict was a great theologian, and he said his thoughts were with Catholics in the UK and around the world. The German leader in Benedict's home country of Germany said the world had lost a formidable figure. He said that Benedict was a great theologian and a combative personality.
Bethany, thank you. And there'll be a special programme about the death of Pope Benedict on Radio 4 tomorrow on Sunday with Edward Sturton. That's at 7:10. Russia has launched another barrage of missiles at cities across Ukraine in the second big attack in 3 days. A number of explosions were heard in the centre of the capital, Kyiv. Residents there have been told by the authorities to remain in shelters. From Kyiv, Hugo Bechega sent this report.
On New Year's Eve, another wave of Russian missiles. The air raid alert sounded at lunchtime, on a day families usually celebrate together. Alyona was at home when her district in Kyiv was hit.
Me and my husband were literally thrown into the corridor. We heard glass shattering and then there was an explosion, one after another. We came to the street and saw ambulances and casualties.
You can see the point of impact where debris from a missile that was intercepted fell from the sky. One person was killed there, a mother of two who was in the kitchen making dinner to celebrate the new year.
President Zelensky accused Russia of deliberately targeting civilians.
Several waves of missile strikes on New Year's Eve. Missiles against the people. The people who did this are inhuman and they've lost. We know that terrorists can't change.
On the last day of the year, Russia brought even more destruction to a country that's already seen so much of it. Hugo Bechega, BBC News, Kyiv.
4 members of the England women's football team who won the European Championship this year are among those named in the New Year honours list. There's a knighthood for Queen guitarist Brian May, while the former Olympic heptathlete Denise Lewis becomes a dame. This report from Lisa Mazimba contains flashing images.
Brian May on top of the palace and now feeling on top of the world. The guitarist and animal welfare campaigner, knighted not just for services to music, but for his charity work too.
I do feel that this is not just a kind of reward or a gong, this is a kind of license, a kind of commission to carry on doing what I'm doing, and it gives me a bit more power to my elbow. So I'm very happy about that.
A fellow campaigner, Virginia McKenna, becomes a dame for her work with wildlife.
I've achieved a lot in football and I've given a lot to my career in football, so I guess to be recognised for everything that I've done, it's pretty special and pretty amazing.
For helping organise this year's spectacular Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, along with an outstanding sports career, former Olympic champion Denise Lewis is made a dame.
Once you've accomplished something as meaningful, as, I guess, iconic as an Olympic gold medal, I think it's about giving back, and so I have endeavoured to do that. And so I'm beside myself, I'm overwhelmed, I'm delighted and immensely proud.
Like most of those being honoured, Luena Hood isn't famous. She organised truckloads of supplies for people fleeing Ukraine and receives a British Empire Medal.
How does it feel to be honoured like this?
I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And I think because we've had a bit of a gap and I'm able to look back and reminisce, it is incredible what you can do in such a short amount of time.
Just one of the many being recognised for making a difference to others. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News.
And finally, countries around the world have already begun celebrating the new year with some spectacular firework displays. This was Sydney in Australia, with the famous Harbour Bridge at the centre of festivities there. Hong Kong has welcomed the new year with a multimedia light show over Victoria Harbour. And Taiwan launched 2023 with light beams and lasers emanating from its landmark Taipei 101 building as the clock struck midnight. Well, that's it from us. We're back with the late news at 10 past 10. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Goodbye.